Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, everything I read in July. So as usual for these monthly wrap-up videos, I'll talk through all the books I read in July, 23 of them in total. And then if I remember, because sometimes I'll forget, I will tell you my favourite at the end. If I forget to do it in this video, leave a comment asking me and I'll tell you what my favourite was, because I did forget to do it last month in June. I took part in 2 reading events in July. So those were Giallo July, hosted by Alex from the Bookcubus, Bert from Pastori Time and Kelsey from Slime and Slashers. A fantastically enjoyable readathon and watchathon that focused on Giallo movies and the kind of books that were published by Mondadori in Italy in kind of the 50s, 60s and 70s. So the kind of vintage crime and mystery novels they published, which is the kind of book I really, really enjoy. So it was a great event for me. And then also took part in an ongoing reading event, Summer with the Coltons, which is being run by Sarah from the Bookish Knitter, reading the Coltons of Montana series from Harlequin. So really enjoying those. So I've got a couple of those in this list to talk about. And then also did a couple of buddy reads this month, and the group read for the Criminally Book Club, which was Recursion by Blake Crouch. So I'll get to that one in a bit. Right, so let's crack on. I won't spend too much time talking about each book or we'll be here all day, but hopefully I'll give you enough information about them to kind of whet your appetite and give you an indication of if it's the kind of thing you will enjoy. So the first thing I read was a book that worked for Giallo July. That was The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie. I read it in memory of Alice from the channel Alice and the Giant Bookshelf, who very sadly passed away recently. Agatha Christie and Hercule Poirot in particular were a favourite of hers. This was the first Poirot novel, and I really enjoyed it. You can see, it's easy to see why reading it Poirot became such a big character and Christie became such a successful author. Just a really enjoyable kind of country house style mystery. Watching Poirot's little grey cells, kind of work as he went through the book was really, really entertaining. So enjoyed that one a lot. After that, another one for Giallo July, because it had yellow on the cover, was Queenpin by Megan Abbott. So this one I didn't enjoy quite as much. I was expecting to really like this, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. So this is a kind of pulpy, vintage noir style book, but written quite recently. I've enjoyed previous things I've read by Megan Abbott, and I did enjoy this. I did enjoy this a fair bit, but I just felt like it was a bit overdone. So it's about this young woman who gets involved with this older woman who's running like a kind of gambling racket. She's going around like collecting money from people and that kind of thing. She has a boyfriend who's kind of trouble and who gets into more and more trouble as the book progresses. So it's that kind of hard-boiled noirish style of things, which I do, tend to really enjoy, but I just felt like Megan Abbott was maybe trying a little bit too hard with this one. I think this is quite an early book by her. Some of the more recent stuff I read by her, I think was a bit more refined. She kind of got her kind of pace right, if that makes sense. So yeah, I've certainly enjoyed more recent things by her. Moving on then, something very different, a vintage science fiction novel, Space Prison by Tom Godwin. This was great. So this was sent to me a while ago by Jamie Court, who's the author of the erotic horror sock puppet short story, A Puppet Scorned, which if that synopsis attracts you, you will enjoy. A very, very strange short story, but quite entertaining. And there's a sequel to it as well, The Soxicist. So this was great. So this is about there's a war going on between humanity and an alien species, and like this spaceship that's fleeing Earth gets captured, all the humans on it get captured by the aliens and put on this terribly inhospitable planet. And it's just about them trying to survive, basically, trying to form a new civilization on this planet and live day by day. It was really good, quite gritty, more gritty than I expect from, kind of vintage sci-fi, which tends to be kind of more hopeful, I think. But yeah, quite dark, but really very, very enjoyable. After that then, I read something slightly different from the kind of thing I normally read, in that this is, you know, considered to be a modern classic. It's the kind of book that turns up on, you know, those kind of 100 best books type lists. That book is Stoner by John Williams. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I really did think this was excellent. I've done a review of it on the channel, which you can go back and look at should you want to. So just a book about the life of an academic, about his you know, kind of growing up, his going to university, his deciding that he wants to become an academic, his life as, you know, as a teacher, as an educator, his marriage. But there was just something about this book, despite the fact that nothing particularly exceptional happened in it, that was really, really compelling. I really did think it was wonderfully well written, and I enjoyed it enormously. After that, another one for Giallo July, Little Girl Lost by Richard Aleas. So this was a fun New York set detective novel where the detective is investigating the murder of someone who he dated in high school. So a girl he went out with in high school has now turned up dead, and he's trying to figure out why. So it was interesting from that perspective, in that there was kind of a personal element to the detective's investigation, and it became quite, you know, kind of self-reflective at times as a result of that. So yeah, I thought a very solid detective novel. After that then, I read another one for Giallo July. So this was a book that was originally published in Italy by Mondadori, the publishers of what became known as the Giallos. You can see one of Mondadori's on my shelf behind me there. So this was The Red House Mystery by A.A. Milne. So A.A. Milne, best known for creating the character of Winnie the Pooh and Christopher Robin and all the creatures of the 100 Acre Wood. But this was a mystery novel he wrote. So he was a huge fan of mystery novels, and he wrote just one of them. And it was wonderful. It was really, really enjoyable. So a locked room mystery. This guy turns up at this kind of country house just as this, you know, crime is happening. So he kind of witnesses the aftermath of it and gets involved in the investigation of it. Him and another guy who's a friend of his. And there was just a wonderful playfulness to it. And it's interesting, isn't it? I think I reflected on this in my weekly wrap-up where I talked about it, that this was a book written between the wars. So after the First World War, before the Second World War, when, you know, civilization was trying to get back to some sort of normality. And interesting that that's when the golden age of crime fiction sprung up, which really treats death as a puzzle, as a game. I think there's probably something interesting going on there, isn't there? Anyway, Red House Mystery, really beautifully enjoyable, just a really cleanly done, very enjoyable, very amusing at times mystery. So I had a really, really good time with it. Next up then, some contemporary crime. So this came out very recently, came out in July. Dead Mile by Jo Furniss. So I have done a full review of this on the channel. This was really, really good. So I was fortunate enough to go to an event at a local bookshop, Chaps 34, which is in the town where I live. I'll leave a link to their website in the description for the video, which is a lovely little indie bookstore. And they did an event where they had two crime writers, Jo Furniss being one of them, talking about their work and talking about why women enjoy crime fiction. So Dead Mile is a kind of a locked room mystery, but set in a traffic jam. So the concept is there's this policewoman who's travelling back from the airport. She gets stuck in the traffic jam, and then she realises that the passenger, or the driver rather, of one of the cars near her is dead. And everyone's snarled up in this traffic jam. No one can get away, and she investigates and tries to figure out who of the other people stuck in the traffic jam is the murderer. So a really, really great concept. The central character I thought was really well done. So just a very, very enjoyable mystery, and definitely a good book for, you know, kind of beach reading in the summer. Very compulsive, a very enjoyable page turner. Next then, as part of my ongoing read through of Patricia Highsmith's books, which I'm doing with Anne from the channel and Novella. We are very near the end of that now. We read Found in the Street. So this was kind of classic Highsmith in terms of the themes and the plot and stuff like that. It felt a bit at times like maybe she was, you know, it was towards the end of her career. You know, she was kind of spinning the wheels maybe a little bit. I'm not sure it had the freshness of some of her books, but it was still really enjoyable. And I thought the end, the way everything wrapped up at the end, was very well done. So this is about a guy who finds a wallet in the street and takes it back to its owner. And these two characters, and this is typical for Highsmith's books, you get two male characters who are quite different from each other, who end up kind of rubbing each other up the wrong way. that's what happens in this book. The guy who gets the wallet back can't figure out why anyone would give back a wallet they'd found without taking any of the money, and the guy who's given it back kind of feels like he's owed something, but openly says, oh, you don't need to give me anything, but then kind of holds a bit of a grudge against this other guy. There's a young woman who kind of gets involved in this triangle as well, so just a solid Highsmith thriller, but maybe not one of her best. After that, another crime novel. So this was the first book I read for my Novel Life challenge. So this is a challenge I've talked about on the channel, where I'm going to be reading a book from every year I've been alive, starting with the year of my birth, which was 1973, which was when this came out. This was really, really good. So Donald Goines is a really interesting writer. He had a very short career. So he died very young. He was murdered. But wrote a number of very, very gritty crime novels, of which this is one. So this is about a young black girl in, I can't remember if it's New York, some big city, who her parents are like awful basically, and she falls into drug addiction and sex work. And it's just about her life and her boyfriend and, the kind of trials they go through. Goines is great because his writing is quite quite stripped down and simple, and the locations he describes and the characters he describes and the events he describes are really gritty and hard hitting, but there's somehow a real heart to his writing as well. You really end up caring about these characters, so I did think this was very good indeed. After that, another book that has just come out. So this came out on the 1st of August. And again, there is a review of it on the channel. So this is Cabaret Macabre by Tom Mead, another locked room mystery. So there's a bit of a theme of locked room mysteries this month. This is the third in a series of books Tom Mead has written about a character called Joseph Spector, who's like a stage magician, but also a detective. He teams up with a policeman called Flint, and they solve these mysterious, seemingly impossible mysteries together. This one was kind of a country house one. All of these books, all of them so far, I think, have 3 separate mysteries in which are kind of intertwined, which the duo need to solve. So this was just as enjoyable as the other ones. Really intricate, but with a nice bit of humour and decent characters as well. So it keeps you interested, even if the gripping the mystery doesn't grip you. The characters are fun enough to keep you reading, but the mysteries are just beautifully done in these books. Right, next up then, another book by an author who was at that event I talked about earlier. So this is The Echo Man by Sam Holland. So this is the first in a series of serial killer thrillers. I think there are 3 at the moment, but I think she said she was working on the 4th. So this is a UK set serial killer thriller about a serial killer, the Echo Man, who is repeating the crimes of famous serial killers, and about a group of detectives who are investigating those crimes. There's also a local woman who becomes involved in that investigation for various reasons. I just thought it was just a really solidly enjoyable page turner, just a really fun seems a funny word to use about serial killer books, doesn't it? But there's something enjoyable about watching that hunt, about watching the forces of law and order, if you like, trying to track down the killer and bring them to justice. And this was a very good example. I'll definitely be reading more books in this series, I think. So yeah, enjoyed that one, and may do a review of it on the channel. I haven't got around to it yet, but I think I probably will at some point. Next up then, another one for Giallo July, because lots of yellow on the cover. And again, a book that was published in Italy by Mondadori. So this is Too Many Clients by Rex Stout, one of the Nero Wolfe mysteries. I think it's about 2/3 of the way through the series. I can't remember if it was in the 20s or 30s. I think it was in the 30s in terms of the ordering of the series. But just a really enjoyable mystery. The first Nero Wolfe mystery I've read, Archie Goodwin, who's Wolfe's kind of sidekick, is the narrator of the book and actually does most of the detecting. Nero Wolfe kind of sits in the background and just comes out and is a genius, a deductive genius at times. But yeah, fun mystery. This one being about the body of a kind of wealthy CEO of a business who gets found murdered. But yeah, he had a lot of fun. Rex Stout had a lot of fun putting all the pieces together, and like great dialogue and things like that. Everything I enjoy in this kind of vintage crime novel. Next up, Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle, which I did a buddy read of with one of my patrons, Ida. So I didn't love Chuck Tingle's first horror novel, Camp Damascus. I thought it was good, but I didn't love it as much as a lot of people seem to. Bury Your Gaze, on the other hand, I thought was fantastic. I thought it was really, really well done. So it's about this guy who's works in Hollywood. He's like a showrunner for a TV show, and he gets pulled in by the producer, like the owner of the studio, who tells him that he needs to kill off these two gay characters in the series, where there's been like a plot arc that's been building up to them getting together. So that happens, and at the same time he starts being visited by like monsters and killers and things like that from previous shows and movies that he's made. So in real life these people kind of appear. So it was really creepy at times, really well done, but also very, very funny. I had some really interesting things to say about, kind of the Hollywood system and the way that the LGBTQ community is kind of, treated in popular media. So yeah, just very, very entertaining, very funny, very fast paced and gripping. But yeah, genuinely creepy at times, but overall just a really fun read. So I enjoyed that very much. After that, another buddy read. So this one I did with Joachim, another one of my patrons. We read The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. So this was... I didn't enjoy this as much as the previous T. Kingfisher book I read, which was What Moves the Dead. So it was good that like the first half I thought was excellent. So I had a really interesting narrator. So it's about this woman who travels out into like the middle of nowhere, like on the outskirts of a small town in the States, to like put together or like clear out the house of her grandmother, basically, who's died. And she finds this weird diary there that her step-grandfather kept, which talks about all this weird, creepy stuff going on. There's these weird statues in the garden. So yeah, it kind of builds up gradually, a really like slow, nicely done build-up of creepiness. But then the actual kind of payoff in the final third, I didn't think quite lived up to the build-up. So great start, but after that, not quite so good. But still a fun read. I definitely enjoyed reading it. And then after that, for the Criminology Book Club, I read Recursion by Blake Crouch, which is an interesting kind of sci-fi thriller. So I didn't love it as much as Dark Matter, the previous Blake Crouch sci-fi thriller that I've read, but this was interesting. So it's about this condition called false memory syndrome, which is kind of spreading. So people keep on having these memories that don't match with reality, and they discover after a while that other people are having similar memories. So other people are remembering the same things that didn't happen. So it focuses on two characters, one of whom is a policeman, and one of whom is a scientist. And the scientist kind of storyline takes place 10 years previously, and she's experimenting with this like cure for like Alzheimer's and things like that. And you can tell that there's some sort of connection between what she's doing in the past and what's happening in the present. So yeah, an interesting sci-fi novel. I felt like it kind of tried to do too many things in one book. It ended up being like a bit too uneven, I guess, in terms of its pacing and themes and things like that, but still an entertaining and fun read. After that then, the first of two books I read for the Summer with the Coltons event. So they're actually both in this because this is a double, so I'll talk about both of them now. So the first one was The Librarian's Secret Scandal by Jennifer Morey. So this was an entertaining, spicy, romantic suspense novel about this woman who's a librarian who moves back to the small town she grew up in. She's got some terrible stuff that's happened in her past. She has a bad reputation in the town, which she has to overcome now that she's moved back, and it's about her hooking up with the local sheriff. So a fun romantic suspense novel, definitely more romance than there was suspense, but there was a reasonable amount of suspense. And then Dr. Colton's High Stakes Fiancé by Cindy Dees is the next book in the series, and there's an overarching story to this series. There's 6 books in total. The overarching story is about a body that's found of someone who everybody thought was murdered like 15 years previously, but clearly wasn't, and has been living in seclusion and has now been murdered. So it's a really interesting hook for the series, and it's gradually being investigated as the series continues. So the fourth book, Dr. Colton's High Stakes Fiancé, again, a bit light on the suspense. There was some kind of natural disaster type stuff towards the end that I quite enjoyed. But this one was like a second chance romance. So this couple who had been together in high school and had then split up for various reasons. The woman has now moved back to the town and like they rekindle their love for each other. So that, again, was very enjoyable. After that then, right, we are getting closer to the end now. So All the Fiends of Hell by Adam Nevill. I will definitely be doing a review of this on the channel. This was phenomenally good. So it's kind of an alien invasion book, but an alien invasion book that feels like horror. Feels quite kind of Lovecraftian at times, that kind of cosmic horror. So it's about an event that happens where everybody, that like the skies go red and people can hear these bells and they go outside and they get kind of sucked up into the sky. So it focuses on the characters who survive that night, a few of whom there are very few. So basically the vast majority of the human population is gone, and the main character is this guy who's had like a terrible case of the flu during this, which kept him bedridden for the night of the bells, as it's known. So he's survived that and kind of comes out of the kind of fugue at the end of his flu and finds out that pretty much everyone else has gone. So it's about him trying to survive. He finds a couple of kids who are in a similar situation to him, who've like lost their parents and everything, and it's about that trio trying to survive. The alien creatures in this are really, really creepy. There's some, as is often the case in this kind of thing, there's some kind of human conflict as well. But I just thought it was really, really well handled. And the central character, this guy, was perfectly done. A really interesting central character because he's very different from the kind of heroes you normally get in this kind of alien invasion thing. So very much enjoyed that. After that then, another book by an author who was at that event I talked about. So you may have noticed I said there were two authors at that event, but I'm actually talking about three different books. And that's the reason for that is that this book, Gallows Wood by Louisa Scarr, is actually by the same person who wrote the Echo Man, the Sam Holland book. So Sam Holland and Louisa Scarr are the same person. That Sam Holland is just a pseudonym that she uses for those serial killer books. So this was just a really solidly enjoyable police procedural book. It's about a female dog handler who gets involved in investigations of some bodies that have been found in a local wood. So the dog handling stuff was really interesting. It was clearly, a well-researched book, and it was really interesting to read about that side of things. I thought that the way that the dog, like the relationship between the heroine and her dog was portrayed was really well done. There's like a kind of closeness between them that I thought was fantastic. And the dog, is decently involved in the investigation as well, should we say. So yeah, really, really, really good. There was like a whole backstory as well that gets pulled into the investigation about this female police officer. But yeah, overall, just a really enjoyable police procedural. The dog element, I thought, added something to it. There's a bit of romance as well. It's just a fun, entertaining read. Okay, 3 books to go. Right, so next then we have Hell's 8 by Stark Holborn. So this is the second book in the Factor series by Holborn. Just a really fun sci-fi series that kind of blends science fiction and western. So set on this moon, Factus, which is kind of like a kind of frontier area. So it's a bit like, I guess, the Star Wars show The Mandalorian, that kind of vibe that feels a bit like a western at times. There's kind of shootouts and things like that, but definitely got science fiction vibes as well. Really, really enjoyable. The central character Tenlo, who is in the previous book, which is called Tenlo, is a really interesting character. Just a fun, slightly pulpy, humorous at times, nicely inclusive read. A lot to enjoy in these books. Next then, we have another serial killer book, but one that approaches the genre in a very different way to the Echo Man. So this was Letters to the Purple Satin Killer by Joshua Chaplinksy. So this is basically just a series of letters that have been written to a serial killer who's in prison, like awaiting his sentencing, or awaiting his trial initially. Really, really interesting. He's like a horribly brutal serial killer, and you get some details of his crimes. But completely told through these letters. You never get letters back from the serial killer to the people who have written to him, although clearly he has replied to some of those letters, because when you get like further letters on in the chain, they make reference to his replies. But just a really interesting way to approach that subject matter. And I thought it was a really well done examination of how we think about serial killers in society, and how they sometimes they kind of get glorified to an extent. So yeah, I thought it was very, very well done. Finally then, the third book in that Factor series by Stark Holborn, Ninth Life. This one was I really enjoyed this, but it's quite different from the previous two books in that focuses on a different character. So Tenlo is the focus of the first two books. This one focuses on Gabriela Ortiz, who is a character is in the previous books. But this is almost feels like a series of short stories. It's quite episodic, and it's got that kind of pulp fantasy feel to it. Almost feels like it could have been published in serialized form in like an old pulp magazine or something like that. And they've definitely got more of a kind of science fantasy, kind of Sword and Planet kind of vibe to it than a Western vibe. But still really, really enjoyable. Some great kind of set piece action sequences. Just another fun read. Everything I said about that first book is true for this one as well, in terms of it being entertaining, gripping, amusing, and they just have a really nice vibe to them, these books. There's just something almost cozy about them. You're going to have a good time with them, and I definitely had a good time with this one. So that is everything I read in July, and I have remembered I need to tell you what my favourite book of the month is, and I'm a bit torn here. There were two books I read, both of which were excellent. So let me just grab them back off the stack. So there were three books I think I gave 5 stars to this month. So one of those was the A.A. Milne book, The Red House Mystery. One of them was Stoner, and one of them was All the Fiends of Hell. The Red House Mystery, I think, probably didn't deserve 5 stars. I was just on a high when I finished reading it, particularly because the end of it is just perfectly done. So I think maybe 4 stars is a fairer rating for that one. These two books, it's difficult to pick a favourite because they are so very different from each other. This is an excellent, excellent horror novel with a really interesting central character. This is, much more literary, but also has a really interesting central character. I think, though, I'm going to go with All the Fiends of Hell as my favourite book of the month for 2 reasons. One is I think it's more of a me book. But secondly, because I felt like the character progression for the central character in this book was actually better than Stoner. So Stoner is, considered to be an absolute classic, and rightly so. I do think it's an excellent book. But I thought the central character in All the Fiends of Hell was so well handled by Adam Nevill. I really was fascinated by him, and I've kept thinking about him as a character since I finished the book. So yeah, this is my book of the month this month. Okay, so that's everything I read in July. Hope you enjoyed that wrap up. Let me know your favourite book of July. Let me know if you took part in Giallo July. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.